been almost 2 years since we released our first 100 Years of Beauty videos. And so we thought we'd take this opportunity now to just reflect and to go back through the archives and make little research videos for all the ones we missed. So I know you guys were missing them, and we were listening, and we're here to respond with more. So today we're talking about Nina and Marche's videos, our first 2 episodes. We released a supplementary side-by-side comparison for the 2 of them. And it's a simple editing maneuver just to take these 2 videos and hold them up side by side. But what we're really doing is showing you that there are 2 completely different histories that coexisted in the same place in the same century. We live in a Black Lives Matter moment, and really explicit racial discourse, it comes to the fore, as it should. We can't actually separate that experience of being political subjects in the world, responding to that, and just consumers of beauty videos on YouTube. We're actually that same person. So when we reflect about the last century and how women have been affected by beauty, we see that beauty is a kind of labor that women perform, and that labor is distributed differently depending on who you are. And in this case, when we compare Nina's video with Marche's, that beauty itself has a racialized history. We all know to say that race is a social construct. And what we're showing you in this side-by-side comparison of these 2 women being made up is that actually hair and makeup and just our tastes and preferences are actually what help construct race. Beauty is one of those industries and environments that is still completely segregated, right? We have completely different publications like magazines, products, even things like Band-Aids, which are made in different skin tones, right? All of that is to say that we think of ourselves as, well, we can all agree now that we're not in a post-racial society. But it's disheartening to think that something as aspirational and as hopeful as beauty itself in this supposedly progressive liberal democracy, that we still have incredibly segregated forms of living. Beauty is in particular one of those. Even women's representation in historical visual archives is unequal, right? There are plenty of images of white women out there to choose from, but it's in deeper parts of the archive that we have to go for representations of African American women. Even in photography, the chemical emulsifier that gets used to develop film, it has historically been optimized for white skin. So built into the technology of even taking images is already a kind of racial bias. Another stark difference for me is looking at, say, the counterculture movement we've represented in the 60s and the 70s. You have people that were really calling into question sexual politics, women's role in society and in the home. I think we can look at countercultural movements and in completely different ways that white women and Black women visually represented that kind of protest. We see in Marche's Afro a kind of Africanist movement to embrace natural hair, right? And make it itself a visual signifier for political resistance. Whereas the kind of styling you see on Nina when she's a hippie, or maybe a watered down version of a hippie, looks a lot different. Its aesthetic is not confrontational, right? It's soft and earthy, as if it's returning to some organic past. We transform Nina into these different archetypes of white female beauty. The Gibson girl in the 1910s, Marilyn Monroe in the 1950s, the hippie chic chick, right? Meanwhile, in Marche's video, there's a completely separate set of archetypes that are just as iconic. You know, I'm thinking of Janet Jackson's Poetic Justice box braids look, or, you know, the cornrows that Alicia Keys might have been rocking in the 2000s. Marche's video is showing us that Black women have had a very particular beauty tradition, right? And that is one that has been passed down through families at home in the Black beauty salon tradition. And all of these cultural spaces in which are particular to Black communities. When we're looking at the storyline in Nina's video, we're seeing one that's really familiar, right? This isn't a beauty tradition that mothers teach their daughters the same way. It's one that's omnipresent in our popular culture. Those images have circulated everywhere. They saturate our consciousness. And those images of beautiful white women in their most ideal forms is what begins to constitute our imagination of what the United States is, right? When we think about the ways that racial segregation persists, we don't often think to look at beauty and its idealized forms as one place where we continue that. The 100 Years of Beauty has been a project about representing women. One of, I think, the critiques is that we've chosen glamorous fantasy images from popular culture that don't accurately portray what life was like for these women. And I think that's totally fair and true. But the problem with history is that if we try to go back and find the faces of women that are supposed to represent real people, that they're actually representations too. And if we're coddling together a narrative and we've chosen a nurse and a factory girl, if we don't know their names and if they're not real people either, they're just as cosmetic. And beauty itself reveals just as much through fantasy as, say, history tries to portray reality. We began this project by trying to visualize how women's ideal forms of beauty have evolved over the last century. And we use the format of a time-lapse to show you exactly how it's constructed and deconstructed. We, I think, are subliminally trying to tell you that we can easily unmake and make and refashion and unfashion our identities.